And the fate of General Flynn, just one of the many staff dilemmas. You hear these rumors, and it depends on who you talk to in the White House. Some say the chief of staff is in trouble. Some say this staffer's in trouble. This one's trying to angle that one. Set that aside for a minute, the palace intrigue, if you will, the chaos that is trademark Trump. Let's talk about General Flynn for a minute. The vice president met with him a couple times on Friday. The vice president feels his credibility was put on the line here. But for all the criticism of General Flynn, there's a jury of one here, the president of the United States. Does he survive this?
From what I understand, he absolutely is on the rocks. But we don't know yet because, as you say, the decision is to be made inside one man's brain, and that person is the president. And I think Stephen Miller, from what I understand, was speaking truthfully when he went on the shows yesterday and basically said he didn't know because it was Trump's decision. And from what I understand talking to senior people in the White House, they also think Flynn's in trouble, but they don't know because Trump hasn't come down yet, and that's sort of the way this place works.
And we saw during the campaign, he replaced his campaign manager when necessary. He always waited, took it right up to the wire when he had those turnovers. So General Flynn has been with him from early on. He is one of the most loyal people in the Trump circle. There are a lot of people who also say that he feeds the dark side of this president with conspiracy theories or don't trust the intelligence and the like. But the question, you learn a lot from a president in their early days, and let me pause for a second and say, we've covered a lot of administrations at the table here. There's always some turmoil in the early days. So at some points you say, okay, calm down. But at other points, this is the National Security Advisor, and he did put the vice president in a horrible position on national television where what Mike Pence said was not true, and General Flynn told him to his face he didn't discuss sanctions.
It's hard to say how this plays out because sometimes criticism of a figure by the right figures causes Trump to double down on that person and protect that person. At other times, he just cuts them loose. So, and that's the feeling that pretty much every White House staffer has right now, apparently. And so that's the question, too, with Pence. Like, if you're going to take this up the chain, you got to know that you're going to be successful. And it's very hard with Trump to know that he'd back Pence instead of Flynn. No one knows the answer to that question. I think that's where he gets a lot of his power in his management style, such that it is.
And there's the National Security Council. If you're watching at home, you don't hear much about it, but it's hundreds of people. They get loaned in from other agencies around the country. Absolutely critical when a president has to make a decision like the president faced over the weekend when North Korea launches a missile, when the president's preparing for a meeting like he's in now with Justin Trudeau and the NATO relationship and the like. Listen to this from the New York Times today on the turmoil inside General Flynn's National Security Council. 3 weeks into the Trump administration, council staff members get up in the morning, read President Trump's Twitter posts, and struggle to make policy to fit them. Most are kept in the dark about what Mr. Trump tells foreign leaders in his phone calls. Some staff members have turned to encrypted communications to talk with their colleagues after hearing that Mr. Trump's top advisors are considering a, quote, insider threat program that could result in monitoring cell phones and emails for leaks.
Sounds like reporters.
That is not.
We wake up every morning.
It's no way to run any railroad. It's no way to run any railroad. But you need these people, especially at a crisis moment, sharing information quickly, trusting each other, and then trying to boil down and distill advice they give. The staff gives to General Flynn. General Flynn gives to the president. This is not funny.
And two things you haven't seen. One is you have not heard from Donald Trump himself on this controversy. You probably will at this press conference with the Canadian Prime Minister.
Right.
And the other thing is, what you haven't heard is another name coming out of the pack. Maybe they could replace him with so-and-so. And that's really important because if you don't have a logical replacement lined up, why would you push out someone that you know is loyal to you?
And remember, General Flynn had a lot of critics coming in. There were a lot of people in the military community who didn't like him when he served. He had to leave the Defense Intelligence Agency. He has some friends on Capitol Hill, some others not on Capitol Hill. So part of this is beware what you listen to because he had the carts were swirling even before he took the job. So we'll see what happens now. More broadly, though, you see in some accounts, well, Reince Priebus, the president's out of favor with Reince Priebus. And part of this is the president's fault. And I mean it this way. He gets on the phone a lot, and he calls his friends. And when he's talking to one friend, let's say it's his former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, he's a Tea Party guy. He's a stir it up. He's a don't trust the establishment. He calls his friend out in L.A., Tom Barrack, the developer. Calm down, Mr. President. Take it slow. Have a long view. He calls a bunch of different people, and then when you talk to those kind of people, they all give you different snippets and perspectives on what the president's thinking at any given moment. And what you get is, Reince is doing great. Reince is going to get fired. Steve Bannon's the most important person in the White House. Steve Bannon's in trouble. Which is it?
We don't know. And it was a week ago that there were stories written that said that Reince had suddenly come upon much more authority and that everything was supposed to be run through him. Well, if that was the case last week, you look at this past week, it went pretty poorly, and you can understand why the president might be venting some frustration, at least to his fellow club members at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend, as he appeared to be doing. I would think, though, this is a tricky week to get rid of Mike Flynn, between what just happened in North Korea, the meeting with the Canadians today, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu coming later this week. Do you really want to shake up your national security team at a moment quite like this. There's never going to be a good moment, but this week, especially given that he's coming face to face with some critical allies, I would think it's a tricky week to do it.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu, we should note, he's here on Wednesday. The Canadian Prime Minister at the White House today, he just got on the plane to leave Israel to come to the United States, tweeted a picture of himself and his wife saying a strong alliance is about to get even stronger. So he is hopeful of a very good, a very positive relationship with this president, although this president surprised the Israelis a little bit. First, the White House put out a statement, and then President Trump gave an interview to an Israeli paper where he said, slow down on settlements, Mr. Prime Minister, meaning to Netanyahu, and that's not helpful to peace. How much does this factor in when the president is seeing these reports about General Flynn's conduct? He's been silent on it so far, about this turmoil or knives out within the White House staff competing for each other's jobs, or some of them trashing each other in private communications, even though they work 30 or 40 feet from each other. His approval ratings right now, if you look at Gallup, his net approval rating after 3 weeks is remarkably low. President Trump with a negative net 15, minus 15. President Obama at this point was plus 42. When you take approval and disapproval, add or subtract, George W. Bush was at plus 32. Remember, George W. Bush won a contested election. Bill Clinton plus 17, won with only 43% of the vote in the Ross Perot year. George H.W. Bush plus 45, Ronald Reagan plus 37. When you see Donald Trump at minus 15, and we know that this is the stuff, he pays attention to this. He pays attention to this. How much does this drive what he thinks about the efficiency of his staff?
I think he pays attention to this stuff, but he's also a guy who survived and thrived in the general election to be president of the United States, even though his negatives were extremely bad. So I'm not sure that that's his most important metric. The other thing I would say is the inscrutability of this White House and some of the knives out means that we should be really cautious about who's leaking what and why. And so some of these stories I want to be very critical or skeptical about, or healthily skeptical about. But Flynn himself walked back his denials of this story. So I think that's a really important element of this. Some things can be written off to, well, everybody's leaking for various reasons. This one, the principal himself said, well, maybe I did talk about it.